In 1921, Hitler rose to become the leader of the party, and again, using his magnetic personality, he continued to garner more and more support, until in 1923, the Nazis were confident enough to attempt a coup in Munich and seize power. Known as the Beer Hall Putsch, the effort failed, and Hitler was arrested before being put on trial, but this only furthered the Nazi cause. Hitler used the trial to gain even more supporters, and despite spending a year in prison, in which he wrote his autobiography, Mein Kampf, the Nazis struggled to establish themselves in German politics. Mein Kampf not only outlined Hitler's own story, but it also set about establishing his vision for the future of the German people, and how he believed subversive groups were holding them back from achieving their destiny through measures such as the Treaty of Versailles, which outlined Germany's surrender terms. He specifically identified Jews and communists as being the leaders of this great international conspiracy to keep the German people down after the war, highlighting the harsh conditions imposed on the country by the victorious Allies. The book effectively became the Nazi Bible. By 1933, the Nazi Party had secured enough political support that Hitler legally became Chancellor of Germany. He quickly began passing legislation that would transform Germany into Nazi Germany, and the swastika would symbolize this reinvigorated country. The persecution of Jews, gypsies, and political opponents soon became government policy, as Hitler began preparing Nazi Germany to attain what he saw as its destiny, centered around the concept of the Aryan race, with him as the undisputed leader, the Führer. As the 1930s drew on, Hitler's Nazi Party became firmly embedded, not just in German politics, but German society. The German people had much to thank the Nazi Party for, since they had pulled the country out of the despair of defeat and reinvigorated it, promising that Germany would soon be attaining its destiny of becoming a great power again. Hitler's appeal and influence was not lost on foreign observers, many of whom admired him and even began to sympathize with the treatment of Germany after the war. Hitler would even become Time magazine's Man of the Year. This played perfectly into Hitler's hand, as he began making notions of regaining lost territory in the east and west of the country. The first test of how the Allied powers of Britain and France would respond to his new Germany came in 1935, when Hitler introduced military conscription, which saw the German armed forces swell many times beyond the number permitted by the Treaty of Versailles. However, the Allies did nothing. Hitler also joined Mussolini in sending troops to fight for the nationalists in the Spanish Civil War, giving his forces vital combat experience. In 1937, British Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin stood down and was succeeded by Neville Chamberlain. Meanwhile, Germany continued to rearm and now set their sights on reclaiming the German Sudetenland, which had been absorbed into Czechoslovakia after the war. At the same time, Hitler looked to his own birth country of Austria to become a part of his new Germany, although this was again forbidden by the Versailles Treaty. Austria and Germany had long had an almost symbiotic relationship, and both countries' peoples viewed the other as cousins. Austria even had its own Nazi party, and in January of 1938, they attempted their own putsch, much like Hitler had tried back in 1923. The putsch failed, and many leading Austrian Nazis were imprisoned. Hitler's propaganda machine went to work, creating a false impression that Austrians were rising up in support of their imprisoned Nazis, and so on March 12, 1938, German troops entered Austrian territory on the pretense of restoring order.